Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division 2 video today by me, Vulcan. Today is a very exciting day. I have for you a first look at the 19th Tank Corps, which is one of the new divisions available in the upcoming DLC, Burning Baltics. As a disclaimer, I have to say that Eugen has provided me access to the DLC for free, so big thanks to them. Also bear in mind that this is early access, and therefore everything you are about to see is subject to change. If you'd like to read the description on the right hand side, feel free to pause the video and have a look, but I'm going to be jumping straight on in. So for those of you unfamiliar with the format, I'm going to be looking at all of the units available in the division, and then I'm going to be putting together a quick deck to see what it's like. But let's go ahead and start in the Recon tab. So first of all, we have the WLA DT, our classic motorcycle friends. Nothing special there. New Dosor squads, well, not new, but Dosor squads, they can come in with the WC-52 Dushkas here. These Dushkas are okay to double up on Recon, but they aren't really very strong on their own because they don't have any armor. They will get taken out by light arms fire. Then we have a card of Razvedka. They can only come in Phase A, but you can bring them in with the WC-52 Dushkas again. You've got the Razvedka squads, the standard Razvedka squads. These come with the bazookas, of course. No exciting transports for those. Pretty standard on the availability. But finally, in the Recon tab, we do have a card of T-34 85 Razvedkas. So a Recon T-34 85, which is pretty cool. And it has a very nice camo. Very nice indeed. It is an equivalent to a T-34 85 1943 because it doesn't have the APCR and it has less accuracy on its main gun. So bear that in mind. But otherwise, an interesting tank, pretty expensive. Availability does increase quite a lot into Phase B, so might be something you want to bring in a bit later on. Let's jump over to the Infantry tab. So first things first, Sapere PPSH. These can come in with the M2A1 half tracks. You do get some Lend-Lease half tracks in this division, and those 50 cals on the M2A1s can be pretty strong. So I would definitely make use of them. I'm not sure if the Sapere PPSH are really the best choice. I guess it's an option because the Sapere are very cheap at 10 points, so you're pretty much just paying for the half track to back you up. And as I said, 50 cals are pretty strong, so that could be a good choice. You can bring these all the way to a Phase C if you want, but the availability curve isn't that great. You're better off bringing them in Phase A or really not at all. Avto Komroti is a leader of choice. No interesting transports for those, unfortunately. Then there is the Strauki squads, your standard Strauki squads. You can only bring them in Phase A and B, no Phase C card for these. And the only way you're going to get them in half tracks is if you... Actually, you don't need to upvet them. It's only 9 in Phase A there. So technically, you could bring in a Strelki in M2A1s in Phase A, which would probably be a better choice, in my opinion, than using Sapere PPSH. Strelki Komroti. You can get 4 of these in Phase A, just like the Avto Komroti. I prefer the Strelki Komroti because it does have smoke. So that's really good. It's very versatile, allows you to cover nearby units, especially if you have it like near a support weapon or something that's being hit pretty hard. You can just smoke it off so that the support weapon can get away, something like an AT gun or an infantry gun, something like that. But these can also come in the half tracks if you want them to. You can get Tankovy Korpus. These can also come in the M2A1, so another good candidate for using the M2A1. It's pretty nice for this particular squad because they are a 100 meter range squad. So using an armored car to get them close is pretty nice. But I'm not sure I'd waste an M2A1 getting close. I think I'd rather use M2 half tracks. Because if you use the M2A1 half track to get the Tankovy Korpus close, you end up sometimes losing the M2A1 to close range AT. So sometimes that can be a bit of a waste. You also do have 2 cards of Avtos. These are not too bad. They have quite high availability in Phase C. Good sort of longevity it can give your division. You got to bear in mind that you only have 5 cards in the infantry tab here, though. That is definitely something to point out. So you might want to make up for your infantry in the recon tab somewhat with the Razvedka. Just bear that in mind. But let's continue to move on. We've got the Sapere here. These have, again, the same transports. I think most of the infantry in the tab here seems to have the same transports. These can come in up to 10 in phase B. And then you've got Sapne Komroti and also Strauki DP. Now, all of the Strauki, you can only bring up to phase B, which is kind of forcing you to play the early game sort of like a Vanguard or a Maverick division, because the only phase C card you have of substantial number is in fact the Avtos, and this can be very risky strategy if you start relying on these too much in the late game. You're probably going to want to stack phase B units of Strauki and then see how you get on from there. Let's jump into the tank tab. So the tank tab's kind of the opposite in some ways, because you've got T-34s and IS-2s, which are generally like late game units, especially the IS-2s, that they're more availability in phase C. And if I'm just clicking through these cards, I can see that the IS-2 1943s here do come in phase C, so you can get them that late on. You can get them obviously early as well. The KB-85s are stuck to phase B, but the T-34 85 1943 is going to come all the way up to phase C. So you got T-34 85 Komrotis, again A, B, and C for those. You got T-34 85 1943s, 4 cards availability of those. Technically, you could throw all of those into phase C and have a hell of a lot of tanks. You can see that the price increase on these tanks is quite severe lately. With the range changes in the DLC, you've got to bear that in mind as well. That's also one reason why the T-34 85 Razvedka does cost the price it does. Tanks have gone up in price quite a bit. So the KV-85 it does have slightly better armor, which is why it costs more than the T-34 85 in 1943. This can come in phase A and B. And you got the IS-2 Komroti, 200 points for these bad boys. They have the full 2,000 meter range though, compared to these that only have 1,750 now. So this can exploit the maximum range with the A19 tank gun. But then the IS-2 1943, you can get these in phase C. I do feel like this is, generally going to be an earlier game division, maybe especially a Maverick division would probably suit this quite well, so you can get the most out of your IS-2s in phase B. Anyway, support tab. We've got the Oknemechiki, the good old 2-man flamer squads. There's going to be the Maxim in there as well. These are pretty standard, no crazy transports for these, all pretty standard. Do you have the infantry guns here? The M2 and the Jeep. Pretty standard stuff again for transports. Jeeps are probably preferable because they are the fastest. Got 3 cards of supply available. OT-34s, these are Flamer T-34s. Pretty cool. They appear in a couple of other divisions already in the game. We don't see them used too often. There is the SU-152. This does have the full 2,000 meter range, which is actually pretty strong now. So these sort of guns, like the ISU-152 and the SU-152, will be significantly better than they once were, because they won't be able to be engaged at range by things like Panzer IVs now, which could previously penetrate them in the front armor. So this only has 70mm of frontal armor, so a Panzer IV would be able to hit them pretty hard. But now the Panzer IV, I think, only has 1,750 meter range, so these can outrange them, which is very, very useful now. So it's going to make certain tanks, like these big support tanks, much more useful. I like that change a lot. The commander, you can get the infantry commander, you can get the Bash, the good old car here, the BA car. And then you've got the M2 combat as well. The Bash is probably the best bet. It's faster and it has more armor, so that's probably the best choice. Okay, over to the anti-tank tab. We've got the PTRS 41. This is pretty standard, not the best AT option though. The PTRS is better than the PTRD though. and they can be very good early on for transport sniping. Got the VZ-VOD PTR. Now these have the PTRD. They do have 3 of them though, so the rate of fire is not too bad. But yeah, in general, PTRDs are just worse than PTRSs, so bear that in mind. This VZ-VOD PTR squad, it's okay, but not something you probably want to rely on too much. The 45mm AT guns, of course, these are now only 1,250 meter range, so no longer can you bring one of these in at the start in a Jeep and unload it at maximum range down the road and start sniping transports. That is going to be so good for the gameplay because it's going to create more contention at close range instead of like one side maybe getting all of their transports forced to unload from miles away because the initial forces are forcing them to unload, right? So it does have very good accuracy now. It's up to like, 55%. It's like plus the veterancy there, puts it up to 63%. So that's pretty damn accurate when you get them close, and they can do a lot of damage. They still have the same like penetration values, for example. So yeah, they'll do a lot more damage than they used to because they'll generally start penetrating things that are closer. But they just won't be transport sniping as much, which I think is just much better for the gameplay. And you've got the SG-76M PT here. This has the 1,500 meter range. Pretty decent AT option, honestly, especially with the accuracy increase up to 60%. You put some accuracy on these now, like the veterancy is so important on these kind of units now. It really, really severely increases their accuracy because their base accuracy is so much higher, so the veterancy increase has so much of a larger effect because it's percentage based. So this can go up to 75% accuracy, which is really nice. Like, tank destroyers are super strong now. Su-85 has 1,750 meter range, 50% accuracy. I generally like to upvet these already, but now they get up to 62% accuracy. And they do have like APCR, so these are going to be very nice and strong as well. They have been increased in price a little bit. I think they were 60 points before. Anti-air, we've got the Dushkas. These Dushkas, unfortunately, nothing too special about them. The 37s, don't think AA has really been changed that much in terms of its like AA capability, at least. They can be brought in with the Dushka trucks, but I've just stopped doing that. It just seems like a waste of points these days. 3 in Phase A, 6 in B, 9 in C, 2 cards available. And of course the 85s. Now these 85s, they have 1,750 meter range as AT now, 40% accuracy. So pretty standard, and the HE is matching that as well, but they still have their very long range against aircraft. These can be brought in with supply if you want them to, the Matador Snab, and you've also got the bigger trucks here. There's this 42 and the Rocheville, that thing, yeah. Right, anyway, let's move on. The artillerist, you don't really need to use artillerists that much these days, but let's just check if there's many radios, because I don't think there is. There's no radios in the infantry tab. You don't get any radios on your recon units, even the T-34-85. The IS-2 and T-34-85 Comrati don't have radios. So I feel like the artillerist in this particular division might be quite useful. As well as the VZ-VOD, of course, because the VZ-VOD also have radios. And you're probably going to want to bring VZ-VOD for your leadership anyway, because you have very limited infantry tabs. So I don't think you're going to put any leaders in here. So you're probably going to want VZ-VOD, and then you're probably also going to want an artillerist, because the artillerist will provide the radio, because you're going to want to keep the VZ-VOD safe behind your other units. But let's have a look at their artillery options. They do get the F-22s, and they get the 82mm mortars. I don't think there's really been too much of a range change on some of these units, although the AP shell of the F-22 is now 1,500 meters, so bear that in mind. 82mm motorcycle mortars are available. You also get the 132mm Katyushas, 1 in Phase A, 2 in B, 4 in C. There's also the Su-76 artillery variant. This has 1,500 meter range on its main gun. Is that shorter than the standard one? No, it's not. So it matches the same range as its AT counterpart, but I think the AT one has way better accuracy. Yeah, and also APCR shells. Oh, okay, so the APCR has way better accuracy, but the standard AP is the same. So same accuracy on its base AP across the artillery variant and anti-tank variant of the Su-76M. But the nice thing about the Su-76 artillery is, of course, it has radios, and it's very strong because of that. So I would definitely make use of these alongside some radios. I think they're going to be super useful to make up for the lack of infantry, because you can use these to kind of pin down enemy infantry that you're attacking much more reliably than mortars, because they can kind of pinpoint accurate hit infantry squads, unlike mortars, which might end up hitting your own units if you're firing them very close together. Then there's the 152mm ML20s. Again, radio is super important for these because they have quite long dispersion and range otherwise. But yeah, great option for long-range artillery in the late game. And then there's the B4-203. These kind of suck at the moment, unfortunately, because they don't have health per se. They are treated like armored vehicles, but they don't have any armor, so they're just like any other truck, and therefore they can get killed very easily by light arms fire, and that includes like just artillery shells exploding nearby will wipe them out. So these aren't great when they get counter batteried. That's basically what I'm trying to get at, and therefore that makes them a lot less effective than something like a 152, which has 10 strength, and that means that it can take maybe a couple shots before it dies, whereas like a 203 might just get hit and die immediately, which really sucks. So I would definitely rely more on the ML20 152mm and the Su-76s here than the B4-203, and then probably bring in artillerists and VZ-VOD. Artillerists really aren't something you use very often though. Anyway, air tab for the 19th Tank Corps. We've got the Recon here, the U2LNB. Pretty classic little biplane, seen that plenty of times before. Then you've got the U2LNB Taman. Don't see these cluster variants too often, but you can get quite a lot of these in Phase A, and they can pretty much one-shot enemy tanks. So if you can get them close, then great, but they're very slow, so don't expect to. In the late game, you can get up to 6 of them. Then you've got Yak 1Bs. Now these have very cool camos on them, look at that. Very nice indeed. You can get 4 of them in Phase A, which is actually very significant, and then 8 of them in Phase B. 570 km/h speed with very good agility due to the experience on them. So yeah, these are really, really good options, and you can also bring them in at 2-star veterancy, getting the excellent agility with very good accuracy on their guns. So they take down enemies pretty fast. You can also get the Yak 1Bs. These you can get 3 in Phase A, 4 in B, 6 in C. These have 2 100kg bombs, generally pretty good at taking out support weapons, AT guns, infantry guns, stuff like that. Then we have one of the new units. I believe this is new, I don't think these are in the game yet. The B-25J-30 Mitchell. Classic bomber, this one. Very, very nice bomber. It's one of my favourite bombers, actually. It's very cool. I am very glad that this is now in the game. It has 8 100kg bombs, which is actually not a bad payload. It's pretty good for deleting infantry squads in one run, and definitely can take out support weapons. Now you can get up to 7 of these in Phase C, and you have 2 cards available of the 8 100kg bomb variants. So you can get 14 of these in Phase C if you wanted, which is pretty nice. You also have a card of Yak 3s, again with a new camo. The red nose there on the Yak 3. These are coming in at the 1-star veterancy as well base, which is very, very nice indeed. So in the later game, you might want to bring these in up-vetted for the excellent agility as well. And then there is the new ace, Zakharov. So bring him in with his awesome camo. Very nice indeed. Very cool. And then we've got the B-25J Mitchell with the 500 kilogram bombs, 3 of those. And you can bring these in phase A if you bring 1, 2 in B, 4 in C. So you could mix these with the other ones, and then you could push up to 18 Mitchell bombers in phase C, which would be pretty awesome, to be honest. And they have very good resilience as well, and they're not exactly slow. They're 380 kilometers per hour speed, which is pretty damn fast for a bomber. So, yeah, a pretty solid choice, honestly, and they're armed well. They've got good old 50 cals in them. So I can imagine if you had a lot of these all at once, they could maybe start shooting down aircraft if they're in formation, which would be very cool indeed. But with all that looked at, let's go ahead and put together a division. Now, between the infantry and the tank tab, things are very much like early game focused, but you can also go a little bit late game support, like with things like the Mitchells, for example. So, I mean, I reckon you could probably get away with doing a Maverick deployment type for sure, because that would allow you to bring in like as much stuff as you can early on, especially things like the IS-2s, to get them all on the field and really push your opponent hard. But that doesn't work too well for like 3v3 and 4v4, which I tend to play, or even 10v10s. So maybe even like V for Victory might be quite nice, so you can put a lot of emphasis into the very early game, but then still have decent income into the late game to bring in lots of bombers and stuff, a much more sort of support style deck. And then push all your IS-2s into the late phase as well, and all that good stuff. I guess you could also just go Juggernaut, it might be a bit safer, but the trouble with Juggernaut is just like the infantry tab in general. It's going to be very difficult, I guess, to hold the line until the late game. You'd have to rely so much on your teammates to just have all of your infantry in the early game and then just this kind of stuff in the late game, like the air tab with the bombers and the tank tab. I think what I'm going to do though is we're going to put together a Maverick deck, because it's not something I do too often, and we'll build it like that. So in the Recon tab, I'm probably going to be aiming to bring in quite a lot of Razvedka. So we'll do... I'm not sure I'm going to bring them in the M2s. We'll bring them in the Studebackers, because I want to save the M2s for other infantry squads. So we'll probably do phase A, phase B, phase C for those. And I'm tempted to bring in the T-34-85 Razvedka, but I guess the best bet for those would be phase B. Let's do that, because you get 3 of them, which is a big increase from phase A. Okay, infantry tab. I probably want to bring in the Tanko Desarniki with the M2 half-tracks in phase A. Very good to contest. And then also some Strauki in those... Well, let's put the Strauki maybe in the M2A1 half-tracks in phase A. That would give you a bit more staying power in phase A due to those half-tracks. Although the Strauki DP... I don't know if the Strauki DP are really worth it in this case, because they don't actually do too well at close range because they don't have a PPS Sage. Phase B will probably do Sapri. I could maybe choose to use the half-tracks with the Sapri in phase B. That might be a better choice. We'll use the M2A1s there instead. It doesn't utilize all of them, but it will give us extra veterancy on them, which is pretty nice. And then we do like standard Strauki in phase A with the M9 half-tracks as well, just to make good use of those. And then phase B, we bring in Studebaker with the 18 Strauki there. And then besides those, the other choices we have are the Sapri. We could, in fact, have Strauki DP in phase A, and then a second card of Strauki in phase B. I think that would get the most out of our infantry without having to rely on Avtos. Now, Avtos are very good, but I feel like they're just very specialized infantry that only work within forests, whereas Strauki kind of provide that front line, and having like 2 cards of 18 in phase B gives us the availability for phase C as well, if we need it. I'm just concerned that we might not have enough in phase A. Regardless, let's carry on. So, with the IS-2 1943s, I'm probably going to want to bring an IS-2 in Phase A. I think we'll do a leader IS-2 in Phase A, and then we'll bring in the IS-2 1943s in Phase B. Now, since IS-2 1943s cost 200 points now, we can't actually afford that many. So you've got to be very careful about how we do this. You can't really make decks that rely on heavy tanks too much anymore, unless you're going for something like Juggernaut, where you got 175 points per minute. 170 points per minute is nice, but it only lasts 10 minutes. So you've got to be super careful here. Do you want to bring in probably the KV-85s at some point? It could bring them in up-bedded. It might increase the value of veterancy, actually, now that they cost more, since you're going to have generally less on the field. So maybe I could like bring in up-bedded IS-2s in Phase C, for example. In Phase A, maybe some up-vetted T-34-85s to go alongside the IS-2 leader, which would make them 3-star. In Phase B, maybe we could do the same sort of thing. We will go with that for now. I feel like the availability in Phase B maybe needs to be a bit more, so we'll do that. Yeah. Okay, support tab. Definitely want a commander. The SU-152 I think has good value now. So I'm probably going to bring these in Phase A. There's not many tanks that will be brought in Phase A that can match the 2,000 meter range to kill one of those. I guess Tigers and Panthers maybe, but I'm not entirely sure what range those have. I haven't really had much chance to check. I'm not sure what else I'd want to bring here. Maybe the infantry guns wouldn't be a bad shout. The OT-34 is quite a cheap tank. You can see that the T-34s now only have 1,500 meter range though. So that's something to be a little bit worried about. Let's move on for now. So I do want to bring in the Su-85s. I think these are pretty strong options at the moment for ambushing heavier tanks. So we'll bring in both of those in Phase A and B. I will bring in a card of the AT in Phase A, the 45 mils. I think we'll leave it at that in the anti-tank tab. For the anti-air, can still bring in 2 of these in Phase A, which is pretty nice. But I think what I'm going to do is just bring a card of these in Phase B. This 42 is probably the best choice, actually. Phase A will bring in some up-vetted 37s with the Stubbecker. And I'll bring in some up-vetted 37s in Phase B as well. Okay. Artillerist and Visivod are almost a necessity, which is weird for me to say. Probably want to go Visivod in B though, and then we'll bring in like artillerists in A for radios, and then we'll do Su-76s in Phase A and B with ML-20s. Don't know if I want to bring these in B for a Maverick division. They might not even be worth bringing at all, like the ML-20s there. Okay, air tab. Let's see. So these are going to be pretty useful, the Yak-1Bs. I think these are pretty vital actually for the early game. So we'll bring in a card of those. The Yak-3s, we'll bring in the Ace because it's the Ace after all, so he can be our fighter in Phase A. And then in Phase B, I think we're going to bring some of these Mitchell bombers. And what I might do, just so that we have a bit of longevity for the late game, is maybe put some more in Phase B, or Phase C, sorry. But then again, that would make things quite difficult. Since we are going to be spending some cash on the IS-2s maybe, or that's a 3-minute spend, so it's quite expensive. I think the support tab with the OTs we can bring some of these in Phase B, help support. Although in Phase A might be a better choice, because I don't really have any medium tanks in the early game. So those could be quite nice support for us. Then we bring in some Maxims. I think those are a good choice since we don't have that much infantry. That will certainly make up for my lack of infantry. And then we could also do some Maxims in Phase B as well. Maybe some Flamers to go with them. Again, for more early game capabilities. We'll bring them in with the motorcycles. Now only get 6 in Phase A on that card. The only other choice I have here is maybe bringing in like a card of these in the late game. That would be 2 ticks of income to bring in one of those, so that's not too bad, and it gives us some extra supply because I haven't really got any supply yet. That's something I need to think about. Maybe instead of the Maxims in B, I need to bring in like a card of supply. Yeah, I probably need to bring in maybe even 2 cards of supply if I'm going to be using that many SG-76s throughout the game. Although I think I should probably just upvet some of these. Let's upvet these in Phase A and B, because we're not going to be able to really utilize that many. And then Phase C, I'll bring in more Mitchells, I think. So we have a little bit of Phase C availability for any games that continue a bit longer. But for the most part, this is going to be a very aggressive division that relies on high veterancy in its tanks and anti-tank. I'm not convinced that this is necessarily the right way to build this division. I feel like this might be a little bit botched. But I think it's an interesting take on the 19th Tank Corps. The 19th Tank Corps, it seems to have some very strong late game options in the abundance of bombers and the abundance of IS-2s. But it just really depends if you can support them enough with infantry to keep them alive. Because AT options are going to be way more accurate now, which means that at closer ranges, you're going to want to be scouting those AT guns very quickly. Otherwise, you will get killed. The first shot will hit a lot more times than it used to, which makes AT way more lethal. So watch out for that with this division and others. But that is the 19th Tank Corps complete. And hopefully that's an interesting look at this division. It's nothing too new. I think the only new units or newer units that we've seen are like the T-34-85 Rozhetka and of course the Mitchell bombers. But other than that, a lot of the units we've seen before in other divisions. But it's a very interesting setup and certainly more of an early game focused division in my opinion, with some possible late game support options for larger team games. There you go. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. And I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.